Hello and welcome to another episode of Father and Joe. I am Joe Rockey here with Father Boniface. And to continue the conversation from last week's episode, which was about AI, you are right, Father. There are some important things that we need to clarify with it. My starting position is that the economic reason behind the growth in this technology was not driven by making employees more productive. It was not driven by giving Siri to have a nice little cool widget in your phone so the iPhone was better than the Samsung. It was truly driven by, can I get rid of employees that are in positions of high turnover? You pushed back and said, are all those positions, do we still need them? Is the word automation inherently evil? And of course it isn't. There's lots of spots in our lives where automation makes things better, whether we are the recipient of that product or whether we are the ones who are benefiting directly from having to do less of the work because it's automated. Right now, my son has a ton of Legos. They wouldn't exist without automation. So I look at all of his toys and stuff like that there's nothing wrong with automation in itself. And I hope that it doesn't come across that that's the argument. The argument that I have is that when you are essentially acknowledging, either directly or indirectly, that I am not treating my people well, and I'm going to use this computer or any form of automation to replace the burden of that, that is where I just categorically stand up and see that there's problems. And that is the never admitted but prevalent cause by many companies adopting the AI. And that, to me, is my starting point of why I start with, when I do a consulting project for clients, where are we using this and where are we not using this? And normally, we can use just changing the way we treat each other to get much better results than would even be forecasted by the AI machine, which essentially is telling us to buy it. So that is how I look at this and how I approach AI as a topic overall. And again, Father, I want to give the floor to you because you have such a vast and different experience set in this field.
Yeah, I think what you just noted is tied in with what we're aiming at. So are we? And we had some very nice conversations about work a couple of years ago on this podcast, and it's probably worth reiterating that work is not about the benefit. The goodness of work is not about what is produced outside of the worker. It's about what's produced inside of the worker. So our work forms us. In eternity, the things that we produced here don't exist, but we exist. And what has been formed in us lasts forever. And so we do work and we see the goodness of work, even apart from what we get out of it in terms of monetary benefit or again, the product of the work. It's the virtue that is developed in our diligence, in our reasoning, and as you were just pointing out, in our relating with each other. So we have a team. A team can produce more and respond to certain kinds of problems better than an individual can. A team requires teamwork, and that requires self-knowledge and knowledge of others, emotional intelligence, an ability to organize work, to delegate, to trust, to work through conflicts and problems that arise, to do our part and not overstep. And then, as far the larger the team is, the more we need to learn how to organize, to lead, to all of these things. So, and those things are all formative for us as persons. When you see somebody who has really been formed in a work environment, I learned the dignity of my person because of how my colleagues treat me. I learned the things that I'm able to do because they challenge me to step out of my comfort zone and try something new. I developed knowledge and the process of studying and being mentored by working with someone. And so to really keep in front of us the primacy of the real value, which is that infinite value of the formation of the human person. That's what we're trying to do. It's not so much about keeping the lights on. Keeping the lights on is in the service of forming saints, not saints are in the service of keeping the lights on. And so keeping the proper ordering of those, keeping the proper priorities in thinking about work is really important. And so the things that we don't want to lose in our integration of automation into our personal processes, work processes, family processes, it is all of the human interaction, the primacy of the human person, the infinite dignity of the human person, the development of the human person, the primacy of love, that at the end of the day, we're not judged on how much we produced, we're judged on how we loved. And so if production is not in the service of love, then it's leading the wrong direction, let's say. So again, artificial intelligence is not capable of love. Artificial intelligence is not capable is capable of tremendous production, but that production is not an end in and of itself. And so just the fact that we can produce more, sell more, make more, etc., doesn't mean that it's better. Our measurement is the wrong measurement.
It also doesn't necessarily mean that it's accurate too. And, obviously my world is sales. There's a sales book hanging over my shoulder right now. That is what I do. When people bring me in to be a consultant, 9 times out of 10, it's a revenue-based problem that I'm here to fix as the initial off the jump point. I have to tell you, as a just basic conversation point, everything you just said about connecting with someone, having love with them, wanting to connect with them, is how you do sales correctly. And people using a loveless device, which AI is, and putting it into a profession that has as many negative talks about it of any profession in history. Again, the Bible literally uses salespeople as one of the most common ways of doing it wrong of any example throughout all the professions in the book, which include demons and soldiers. So salespeople historically is the mindset of just, what can I get out of you in a very loveless environment? And when you combine the two, it ends up being a really bad marketing plan. I can go to a much deeper system than that, but there are some places, in fact, many, if not all places, that if you don't start with what is the relationship you're trying to build here, you're not going to work it. And people can say, well, I have a relationship with AI. Well, normally when you really look at it, it's about the same as saying I have a relationship with TV or I have a relationship with radio. Okay, you know how to you use it sometimes all there, but it's not gratifying. It's not something that's going to propel your life forward. And I think that shifting your thought processes in all capacities of life to the relationship in which you're trying to establish goes a whole long way. And one of the things with the large units here is that we see that while they are developing filters to try to distinguish what is correct and best information coming in and what isn't, we still see that at best it's giving a B or a B plus quality answer compared to what an expert in the field would give. And there's a lot of reasons for that. Most of the time is that the experts in a particular field have a personal proprietary benefit for not sharing their reason. You do not see the creators of, I don't know, Coke putting their formula out there and talking with ChatGPT about how could we make this better. They have those conversations in-house. Apple has never once talked to ChatGPT about how do I make the iPhone better, because the people who are the best at what they do aren't sharing with it. So to think that you're going to get above average answers, and this is applicable whether you're using it to write a term paper about World War II or whether you're trying to create a marketing plan, you're going to get average at best. And then when you put the void of relationships on top of it, yeah, you're going to get a lot of paper, but kind of goes back to what you were saying before. To take a step further in your term page analogy here, Father, is our life isn't built to write term papers. Well, our life also isn't built to read mediocre term papers either. So if that's all that the AIs are giving us and all that the students are able to do anymore, well, we're going to be having some pretty big problems. And I just put these up as little speed bursts, stop and think about it. Because the majority of the time when I'm on stage presenting these things, I am the voice of contrary. And I'm surrounded by a bunch of, large language model experts trying to talk about how their thing is the next sliced bread and going to be amazing. And if you take relationships out of it, we're right back to what we're talking about before with the first Pope Leo, reducing people to agents of production and not caring about them. John Paul II talked about that a lot. So, Father, I want to give you a chance to bring this one home.
Yeah, well, again, I really appreciate the topic and your observations. I think it's you're as you mentioned at the beginning of the last episode. I mean, the revolution that you've gone through in your own life in appreciating, really putting humanity at the center. And there's such a temptation for a guy like yourself who's very successful, can produce a lot of things, can handle a lot of processes, is able to get a lot of work done and make sales, that you can instrumentalize the human person. And for you to give the example from your own life and work of putting the human person first. That's and it was a message that Pope Francis said so clearly that just struck me. He said, our economy is desperately broken because it has money at the center. And I was like, isn't that what the economy is about? I thought the economy was about money. That was the point. And he's like, no, the economy is about the human person. The human person has to be at the center. Money is in service of the human person. And so anyway, I appreciate your own witness of that. And then again, the temptation is to lose sight of that in the opportunity to produce more and to use these various tools of automation. Now, again, I've had some wonderful experiences with AI. We're casting a lot of shadows over it, maybe in our discussions. But let me just say, I have ideas about St. John Henry Newman and the way to understand his concepts of the real and the notional, and the ways that those relate to more recent scientific research on the right brain and the left brain by someone like Ian McGilchrist. Who in the world can I have that conversation with? And I know that my ideas are a little bit half-baked. I mean, I'm not an expert on Newman and I'm not an expert on McGilchrist, but I have an idea and I think it's pretty good. But AI is an expert on Newman and is an expert on McGilchrist, because GPT has read all of their stuff and can actually correlate in a way that I don't know anybody that can draw out some things. Now, what's drawn out as I put in the query, this is the real and the notional. I think it corresponds to right brain and left brain. Can you please give me ways that it does and that it doesn't? And then I get a really amazing answer, and I can go back and forth with that. I don't think that's quite right. That sounds really good. What about this? Has anybody talked about this? Or there's some other insight? I can have that kind of engagement with GPT that I can't have with anybody. And so that's really stimulating for my own thought process and my own development. And that I'm taking those ideas, but I need a certain amount of knowledge to be able to do that, so that I can also recognize things that are not quite right, or that I can actually push back at. And I think that's I don't know how to characterize what that level of knowledge is. I need enough to come up with the question, and I need enough to understand the response, and I need enough to critique the response. And then I'm sort of in a good place to not just be snowed over, or that this is interfering with or replacing a developmental process, or so it's a little bit like you said, AI will come up with B or B plus answers compared to the experts that are out there, and so I need to know at least what it knows and what it doesn't know, what I know and what I don't know, and then it can become a great tool for exploring an idea space, and it's always going to be more comprehensive. Uh, I'll bring this to a close and pass it back to you. There's a book called The Undoing Project by Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky, and they did a lot of research coming out of a psychological field, but that got applied to economics about the ways that we think, and it corresponds a bit to the right brain and left brain stuff. But we have some things that we're really confident about, and we don't think at all about them. We just sort of know them, and we come forth with them, and we're wrong in systematic ways, in predictable ways. And so they talked about the anchoring effect, for example. If I said to you, didn't Gandhi die when he was like 90? I actually don't know when he died, but you have an idea. No, I think he was like 60. But because I started with 90, you're only going to come down to like 70. You're going to say, I maybe 70. But if I said, didn't Gandhi die when he was like 25? And you actually think 60, but you're going to come down somewhere in between. No, I think like 50. So that anchoring effect affects the way that we respond and process. GPT is not affected by that.
For the record, Father, the reason MSRP is on every single car, when you look at it, that's the manufacturer putting out the anchor of this is what this vehicle should cost. Whether or not that's what they would accept or not is
correct. No, and they applied all that to economics and won a Nobel Prize for being able to notice how our thought processes are influenced. So GPT can be free of that in a way that it's not going to, when I ask the question, it's not going to anchor to me, and it's going to give me a broader spread, and it's going to perhaps break out of some of my misinformed thought structures.
So I'm going to try to succinctly push back because we're getting close to the end of the episode here. The first one is a recognition and credit to you. You are in the incredible minority that will go through the process of asking it, analyzing it, evaluating it. All 4 steps of that. That is the incredible minority. The majority of how people are using these are essentially as a Google that will give me a little bit deeper answer than just sending me to a website. So that's the first pushback. The second pushback is that it is still an algorithm that at its end of its day is trying to tell you an answer in which you will be happy with. So it is personalizing it based upon your own systematic blind spots. And I'm not saying you as an individual, but you as the user. So it is trying to learn you in a multitude of different ways it goes about this. So it'll give answers that you believe are acceptable and useful. So you'll use our version of it instead of Claude or instead of ChatGPT or instead of whatever other one comes out. It is one of the things that all of the competitors are doing to try to create so that you only use my version of AI. So therefore you keep your subscription open with us. That is part of the business model that's going on behind it. So I use that as a gentle pushback as we only have a couple of moments left to conclude this one.
Well, and that's a great pushback. And I set you up for that pushback in using the anchoring example, but I was thinking, it's sort of like when you're thinking about a particular problem, there's a way that you can get sort of narrow on certain things you're trying to solve and lose sight of a broader spectrum. And that's where, GPT can open up the spectrum. And then I go, oh, yeah, I forgot about those 3 things. And then I can think about that. So those sorts of things can be an assistance to our thinking process, planning process, work process. And what you said, I'm in the minority, and I'm aware of that in terms of how I would use GPT. But those are that's the kind of model that we need to develop of this is how you use it.
Yeah.
It's like to develop a culture around how I use this tool. And I think we've grown, a much simpler form is like a spell checker or a grammar checker, or,
Mhm.
there are certain tools that have become commonplace. But well, and then the automated whatever autocomplete and things like that, and we've
Yeah.
all run into enough of the problems. When we first used them, it was created crazy things, and then we've gotten more skilled at applying them or totally ignoring them, I suppose. But anyway, developing a culture around how to use these tools is another challenge ahead of us, I think.
I'll leave this episode on one thought that I had here. Is that I remember being in third grade when Microsoft Word had those little red squiggly lines and green squiggly lines under everything, and it was still when the paperclip was there, which is definitely dating me. And being told that you will never be able to rely on these if you want to go anywhere. And in terms of punctuation, spelling, the number one editor I had for my book was Grammarly, which is an AI doing red and green squiggly lines. So there is no use in trying to fight it, but there is definitely use in doing some of the things that you were talking about today, Father. How to use it correctly, how to analyze it, and how to boil down one thing. The economy is not about money. It is about the growth of the human person. And that doesn't mean just yourself, but in terms of all of it. So we thank you for being with us here today, and we will be with you again next week.